my name is Akua Gyamfi, founder of the British Blacklist, and I'm honored to be talking to the director of MLK FBI, Sam Pollard. Welcome, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, Leah?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really well. So just to get straight into the questioning. So there's been I feel there's been a sense of expectation that you are the only person who could do a documentary on Martin Luther King from this perspective, justice. Did you feel, you're already frowning, did you not feel that pressure?
No. Listen, there are many documentary filmmakers, of my generation and younger who could have done a film on Dr. King. You got to remember, there's many films on Dr. King, and there's many different perspectives. I just happen to take this particular perspective, but you know, and I know there'll be more films after this that delve into Dr. King in other ways too. So no, I don't think I'm unique in doing this documentary.
Well, I think maybe I'm putting too much on you, but it is more like because of the quality and the way you tackle a subject matter that really gets to the heart of the matter and is honest and candid. I think maybe that's where I'm coming from. It's not that well, I am saying you're unique in a way, but it's more like, did you have people saying to you, come on, Sam, you've got to do this, you've got to do this? Or when are you going to do a documentary on Martin Luther King? Did you have
No,
any of that?
no,
Okay.
no one asked me that. I mean, what happened was my producer of this documentary, Ben Hadeen, had read the book about Dr. King and being surveilled by the FBI, written by the historian David Garrow. And then I read the book and I thought he had said he thought this would be a good film to make, and I agreed.
Mm.
And it was an opportunity, with my long history of working on films about the civil rights movement, going back to Eyes on the Prize too. It was an opportunity to dig into Dr. King and Hoover and the FBI from a different perspective, and I've evolved as a human being and as a filmmaker. So I was going to have a different take than I probably would have had over 20 years ago.
That's fair to know. And I was going to say, how did the story come to you? But on the back of having it in your space, you just made the decision to make the film. What was your initial approach in setting out the blueprint for how the narrative would flow?
Well, it was simply this. I knew two things I knew. First of all, I knew that this was be an archival based documentary based on all that rich archive from the 60s. I knew that it would be a parallel story between the ascendancy of Dr. King and the civil rights movement and the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover basically trying at that same time destroy Dr. King's reputation by wiretapping and bugging his hotel rooms and having informants in his organization. The second thing I knew was that in terms of stylistically, I knew that I didn't want anybody on camera. I wanted all the people that we interviewed to just be voiceover, because I had seen another documentary. You might remember this one from 2011 called the Black Power Mixtape.
Yes.
That had been done by this Swedish filmmaker, and I really admired how he had done that, which was
Yes.
nobody on camera, just archival footage. So I knew I wanted to follow that same template. And the third thing I knew from the top is that I didn't want a lot of people. Normally, when I'm doing a documentary like this, I would interview between 15 and 25 people and basically willow it down to like 12, 10 to 12. This one, I knew exactly how many people I wanted. I wanted two people who were close associates of Dr. King. I wanted two people, possibly two people who might have been in the FBI or were in the FBI now. I wanted two historians and also David Garrow, who we interviewed, the first person we interviewed for this film. So we were able to reach out to Clarence Jones and Andy Young, two of Dr. King's closest associates. We were able to get two historians on board, Beverly Gage, who really knew about the history of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, and Donna Murch, who knew about the organization that started the FBI called COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, to infiltrate organizations like, the SCLC and the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, And then we had a former FBI agent named Chuck Knox, who we found, who lives in Texas. And then lo and behold, my producer, Ben Hadeen, suggested we reach out to James Comey. I thought he would probably say no, but he said yes. Mm. So we had our two FBI people. So that was a small, really focused group of people to give us the arc of this, help tell the arc of this story.
Thank you. And I mean, looking back at your work on projects like Mr. Soul or Maynard, when you're exploring the subject life so closely, what is your route into getting a better understanding of the person you're about to document? especially if they're no longer with us. And I understand that there's so much footage about Dr. King that I will ask you another question about, but just initially your approach to getting in touch with them. So you've got your own real perspective or focus.
Well, I hope usually when I'm doing these films, be it Maynard, be it this one, that I'm able to find people who knew Dr. King or who knew Maynard Jackson, who can speak intimately about who they were and what their what their strategies were, what their personality was like. That I'm hoping to always find when I'm doing a film. And if I can find those people, they help tell the story. Now, in this particular case with MLK FBI, I also needed a few people like Beverly and Donna to give me the largest sort of landscape of American history at that time. You know, the history of the FBI, the history of the FBI surveillance of Dr. King and others who they thought were radical, you know. So those are the things I'm always trying to make sure I figure out when I'm putting the film together.
Thank you. And I might tell you, you did say that the documentary's jumping point was from David J. Garrow's book. So that's the FBI
It
and Martin
was.
Luther King Jr.
Right.
So when you have such source material, do you keep it close by as a centering point? Like, you know, if you kind of get far and wide on it, then you want to bring back to focus, or is it, do you do the research and then that's that, put that to a side, so then it's your narrative, you take off with your own narrative then after that?
I usually do the second. I
Okay.
usually do the research, then I put it away and I don't look at it anymore because I don't want to be too influenced by it. You know, I'm trying to find my own vision and unshaping the story.
Thank you. And I mean, as I said, there's so much footage and so much footage, interviews, and documentation of Dr. King. And I think there's a global assumption of who we think he is. How did you sift through all of that to find the man whose story that we don't know and who you wanted to portray in amongst this story about the FBI and their
Well,
persecution?
you know, I grew up in the 60s. So Dr. King was a major presence in my household. So back then, I was saying in African American households in the 60s, we used to have three images on our walls in the living rooms. It would be Martin Luther King, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and Jesus Christ, you know. So that tells you what we thought of Dr. King. I mean, he could have walked on water back then. But as I've grown up as an adult and I see how much more complicated human beings are in life, I see that Dr. King was a flawed human being, which doesn't take away from the importance that he contributed to America and to the world. So I felt that as a documentarian now, my responsibility is to sort of look at the chinks in the armor, but see that the armor was still really pretty strong. And I've tried to do that with all these other films I've done, like Sammy Davis Jr., August Wilson, or even Maynard. You know, to look at them and still admire them as heroic, but that they were human beings and they had their own sort of Achilles heels.
And I was going to say, did you have any reservations? Because what had long been accepted, dismissed, whispered about behind closed, closed curtains or whatever, whispered about his extramarital affairs. Did you have any reservations that essentially this documentary will validate and confirm that these things did happen? Because I think even I have been reluctant to admit that, okay, this
Well, you know, I wouldn't be honest with you if I told you I'd say I hadn't think about it all. We
yeah.
thought about it all the time. You know, we thought about, Jesus, are we gonna, if we don't sort of confront the notion of those rape allegations, people will say, well, you didn't really want to dig into Dr. King's personal life, you know. So sure, me and the producer Ben and I discussed it over and over again. Were we actually doing the job that the FBI had wanted to do in terms of trying to destroy Dr. King's reputation? Now, I don't think we did. I think we tried to do it in a much more responsible manner than the FBI would have done, you know. So yeah, it was a question. It wasn't sort of like a fait accompli. Oh, we're gonna do it. You know?
I mean, the documentary, I didn't come away feeling like, oh mate, the black Twitter is going to come for you because you're
Yeah.
destroying a hero. But it was a thought like, okay, this now makes a lot of things that we've been able to pass off as rumor fact.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the one challenge I've been getting though is how come you're not really spelling out that J. Edgar Hoover was homosexual? Well, the difference between that is I don't have any. If I had some factual proof, I would have put it in.
That's fine because I picked up, I mean, being from the UK, so far removed, I definitely didn't take history as any of my further education topics. So I've just got the surface knowledge of some of these people, historical people like J. Edgar Hoover. So I
Yeah.
did not know, I had not even heard or knew, I overlooked it, much to my naivete, that he was potentially homosexual. So I saw the slight reference, but there was no other.
Yeah,
Sort
because
of,
there's no facts, you know.
mm.
So unless someone gives me a book with some facts, or they show me the pictures of him and Clyde Tolson together, I couldn't do much more than what we did.
But you planted the seed, and thank you for your information. um, but then also, what struck me about this documentary actually was that because J. Edgar Hoover himself, the man, had an irrational fear or hatred towards Black people, it then informed the FBI as an institution, their behavior and their whatever manifesto or whatever it is, their mission was irrational as well toward Black people. And it I don't know, maybe it's again my naivete in not thinking like that, but you think of the FBI as a thing, a non-living thing that has rules and regulations of how it operates. But actually, it operated because a man was insecure about Black people. Was there anything? And that was my revelation from watching the documentary. Was there anything new that came to you that kind of shocked you, surprised you, or
It,
kind of?
it didn't surprise me, but you know, the thing that you know, and I know that we both have grown up in cultures that's dominated by whiteness, right? And there's a long history where white people in power feel very strongly, either consciously or subconsciously, that the other, that means us, you know, we should just be on the fringes, you know, we should be like, you know, working in their kitchens, taking care of their kids, driving their cars. And why do you have to start all of a sudden saying you want to be equal to us? You know, so he, you know, he's with Hoover. What Hoover was not an anomaly in terms of what white people were thinking. You know that. You know, and they were all thinking like that. I mean, all of a sudden they're saying, "Jesus Christ, aren't these Black people just happy being second-class citizens?"
Yeah, and I think, and that's why it's like it wasn't a surprise, but it was kind of like, oh, this is actually all happening because one man's got a bee in his bonnet, an irrational bee in his bonnet, and yeah, so I felt like, oh, that's silly of me to just realize it,
But
but
remember in the film now. Remember the man on the street interviews,
yeah,
the white man who says, Hoover says King is terrible, but I think he's 10 times worse. And then the white lady who says, I never liked King because he's uppity, you know. I mean, that kind of mindset from white people. Just look at our elections, our run up to the election in 2020, and listening to Donald Trump out there on the stump, basically just blowing the same dog whistles. You know, don't give Black people power. You know, they'll destroy our democracy.
how do you, okay, then on the back of you not being surprised by what you uncovered,
Yeah.
how do you stay, you know, we're slightly laughing and joking about something that's so actually abhorrent, but how do you bring yourself out of a project like this, learning all these facts and having these kind of real racist thoughts that affected us historically up till today? How do you shake it off, if you can shake it off?
You don't shake it off.
No, you don't.
The thing that, you know, the thing that I've learned in my long life on this earth is that the hypocrisy of America, the hypocrisy of democracy is always front and center. They tell you on one thing, this is everybody's equal, everybody's this and that. But you know, and I know, because of economic and social issues and racial issues, that thing doesn't exist. You know, it's only good for them. You know, but when we ask for some things, why are you doing that? That's not good. You're causing upheaval. Why do you want to do that? you know, you know, and it's like it's like it was like when I was growing up, I used to love to watch those films about the British in India,
Okay.
Gunga Din, Lies of a Bengal Lancer, you know, where the British would ride in and they would be fighting the natives and destroying them because fighting for the queen and country, you know, and I learned that, oh my God, man, this is like this is like this is like enslavement, you know. This is absolute enslavement, you know. But but we live in cultures that mythologizes this stuff, so that if you don't realize it, you buy into it. You know that.
Yes, it's very true. Why this title, MLK slash FBI, rather than maybe MLK versus the FBI? It was just
I,
something that
I don't know.
okay. Literally.
we we just you know, in reality it was a working title, you know.
Okay.
We probably thought I think Ben and I thought about coming up with a different title, but then all of a sudden it just kind of stuck.
Okay. Literally, I was like,
There's no sort of like, I can't give you like an explanation and say, well, we decided we had to put the slash in because it was Stephanie. I
yeah.
don't know.
I literally, because I was like, do I say MLK slash FBI? Am I just, so I literally had to ask.
Some people do that. Some people just say MLK. I say MLK FBI. That's all I say.
Okay, fine. MLK FBI. Okay. So reflecting on your projects, including like Four Little Girls, When the Levees Broke, Mr. Soul, they're all powerful, informative, and emotionally draining in their honesty, especially highlighting the injustices that Black people have historically faced. Is your commitment to telling the story of Black America a political decision or dot, dot, dot?
What's the dot dot dot? What's
The
that
dot,
one?
dot, dot, is it or is it? Because I was trying to find a way, actually, I'm being sneaky because I couldn't find a way to encompass whether it's just like your personal decision or is it like a no-brainer? That question doesn't even need to be asked because it's what you would
No,
do.
no, it's not. It is. It's a personal political responsibility. You know, I was very fortunate that I was mentored by a filmmaker who said we have to make sure we tell our stories. And it's St. Clair Bourne. I don't know if you know who St. Clair Bourne was.
Right.
You know, but he would tell me we'd have to tell our stories. And we once went to lunch with a wonderful British filmmaker, Horace Ove.
Yes.
Horace Ove, you know, who had made that wonderful film about cricket. Remember that film? You know, and he was the same way. Our job as filmmakers of color are to tell our stories, you know, and you still see it with Steve McQueen, whatever issues you guys may have with some of those films, you know, you see it with John Acumpha, you know, to tell our stories.
So yes, so it's a natural level. That's why I wanted, that's why I left the dot, 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 because I didn't know what the words were. It was, yeah,
Yeah,
just by
yeah,
nature.
it's a responsibility. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
take it seriously.
So then you don't, so that means it's never been a burden or a pressure where you just might want to tell it.
No, 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 no. This is a calling. This is a
Um,
calling.
I appreciate that. So you're described as a multi-hyphenate. You're editor, director, producer,
Mm-hmm.
creator. And Spike Lee himself is quoted, I paraphrase, that calling you just one thing is not telling the whole story. So was there a need for you to be multi because you wanted, or was it because the industry, you know, telling someone who wants to tell Black stories, they're not going to give you or you're not going to maybe be allowed, given the finances or support to do so. So you took matters into your own hands where you had to be this multi-talented person, multi-skilled person to get the story out there by hook or
Well,
by crook.
well, you know, for really for the first 15 years of my career, I was just an editor. You know, I basically started a business in '72, and I was just editing, you know, bunches of films, documentaries, low budget feature films up until 1987 when I got asked to be one of the producers on Eyes on the Prize too. And that was this decision on my part. Did I want to be a producer director? Did I have the wherewithal to do that? So when I stepped up for that challenge and was able to, I figured out I could prove myself. That's when I started to think back in around 87, 88 that I wanted to do more than just edit anymore. So by the 90s, as you know, might know, I continued to edit, but I was starting to produce more. I produced and directed a documentary with my partner that's going to be on television tonight in the States called Going Back to T-Town about the Tulsa Race Massacre. And then I was also, as you know, in the 90s, editing a bunch of feature films for Spike. And then we did Four Little Girls, which I produced with him. And then, you know, so it was sort of an evolution where I was initially an editor and I became a director and more producing. And in the last 5 years, I would say, I don't edit anymore. I just produce and direct now.
So which is your, where's your happy place?
My happy place is making films. Simple as that.
In any part of the any
No, it's
section of
all
it?
the same.
Okay.
Some people said I love, editing is what listen, my skills as an editor, both up here and with
Mm.
my hands, it's really sort of shaped who I am as a director, really. But I love the process of filmmaking. Spike is right. I'm more than just one of those things.
It's not the full story. So what was your entry point into film? And like, who was it? A what? Was it a who, a where, or a why that you chose to tell stories on screen?
It was called a stumble.
Ah.
I was going to City College in New York City studying business, not very happy. One day I went to see a college counselor and said I was looking for an internship. And she suggested I sign up for this program at the public television station that had been started in 1968 after Dr. King's assassination to get more people of color in the editing room, shooting, producing, doing sound. And it was 2 nights a week for 1 year where in 1971, I got into the program where you made little short films and you were assigned a different role in each film. And I became the editor of a bunch of those little films that we did. And all of a sudden, this window opened up and I said, wow, I think I want to be an editor. And I was very fortunate to get hired as an apprentice editor in 1972 on a film directed by the late Bill Gunn titled Ganja and Hess. And the editor of that film took me under his wing, and I was his assistant for 3 years. And basically, that was like going to graduate school.
Okay, fair enough. And I mean, you mentioned Spike Lee already. I have to ask about your close working relationship with him. What is it about his vision and your own that works so well together? Or does it?
We don't say much to each other.
Ah, okay.
It's fascinating. I met him in '88 up in Martha's Vineyard, and he hired me to edit Mo Better Blues. And then I went on and I did Jungle Fever, right? And I would say to you that on those two films, which was probably 2 years of work, on when you add it up, we never said a lot to each other. I'd look at dailies and he'd give me notes and we'd talk about the cuts. And then after I did Jungle Fever, I then co-edited Juice for Ernest Dickerson. And I always say that 6 months with Ernest, we talked more than Spike and I had talked in 2 years. But
Why?
then Spike and I went on and do a bunch of other films, Clockers and Girls
Yeah.
Six, and Four Little Girls. It's just who we are as personalities. I mean, with Spike, it's really always, I'm that way too. It's about the work.
Okay.
It's really about the work. And we always were about the work. I mean, that's why the relationship lasted so long. And for me, I've said this publicly, I'll say this again. He's one of the great filmmakers. One of the great filmmakers, world
Yeah.
class, world class.
I mean, your talents align, so cool. It's good advice for people. There's no need to have unnecessary conversation. Just get the work done.
We get the
Um,
work done.
just get the work done. So your work is also multi-awarded, of course, but not to take away from any one award. But which of them gave you your first sense of feeling of validation? Not that we're letting the awards dictate the work, but that's something that validated the fact that your message was being heard and understood, and that you're a filmmaker.
Well, it wasn't, I'll be honest with you, the film that I'm really proud of, and it's not about awards for me, it's about
Okay.
just making good films, is Four Little Girls.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Four Little Girls to me was the film where I felt that when Spike did those interviews with those family members in Alabama, I was listening when I was in the editing room editing that material together. It was like listening to my relatives from Mississippi, you know, and Georgia. It was like really going home, hearing that language, that rhythm, that pace. So that film to me just kind of like everything to me was quite working. Me and Spike, we were completely on the same page in how to tell the story, you know, how to shape the narrative. That was a really unique and wonderful experience.
Do you, and I don't know if this is a sensible question, anything from working on Four Little Girls, that you kept in your pocket for what the films that you made going forward, and maybe even up until this point of MLK FBI, like what you learned, skills, techniques, behavior, I don't know.
Yeah, the one thing that comes away from Four Little Girls that I probably tried to follow from film after film that I do is try to make these stories personal and try to find people who speak to that specific experience. So if you go back and you watch my Maynard film, everybody we interviewed knew Maynard Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had some type of relationship with Maynard Jackson. If you watch most of the people in my Sammy Davis film, they knew Sammy. You know, when you listen to when you watch and listen to the voices in MLK, you got two people who really speak to knowing Dr. King. You got two people who really know about the FBI, and David Garrow, who knew the history of both the FBI and King. So I'm always trying to find stories where you're not really having too many outsiders speak to the subject. We want people who are sort of inside the story themselves. And I got that from Four Little Girls.
Brilliant. And I mean, maybe this is the same answer, because I was going to ask you which projects best represents who you are and your message to the world is, but would it be For Little Girls as well?
I just rewatched this other doc that I just finished. I was telling you about this playing tonight on the American Experience, going back to T-Town. And that too is an oral history too, where we talk to people who are in the community, who lived through that rat massacre and lived in Tulsa, in the Black community after that. And so I'm not sure there's one film that does that. I mean, I try to make sure all these films sort of touch some kind of personal chord, but also give you some kind of historical context.
But what about you? You, the man, Sam Pollard. Which film, is there any of the films that, I don't know, that you feel like you put that's most of your soul in it? I don't know. I don't know if the question is right, but
I know what your question is.
yeah.
I got one. I'm finishing up about this musician, Max Roach.
Okay.
My soul's in that one because I knew him for years. And
Okay.
I've been working on that film for a long, long time.
Okay. Okay.
So that one probably, but I'm sort of like the kind of filmmaker that doesn't try to wear my heart on my sleeve.
I hear you.
So I don't really like to say, this really got to me and this really, I'm funny that way.
I think it's fair as well, because also, like I said, it's that shaking off some of the facts and the things that you cover and deal
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
It's also protecting your soul, I think.
Yeah.
So I think this is my last question. What would you like audiences, I mean, it's that very standard question. What would you like audiences to take away and understand about Dr. Martin Luther King after watching MLK FBI?
Well, I want you to understand that Dr. King was a phenomenal human being, civil rights activist, but also a very complicated human being who had a lot of things on his plate in that period between the March on Washington and his assassination on April 4th, 1968. And to also understand that the FBI, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, would go to any means to destroy this man's reputation because of King, because of Hoover's obsession with Dr. King, but his obsession with the fact that all of a sudden he was fearful of a Black Messiah. That is like front and center to me in understanding America. The notion that there's a group of people, and it still exists in America, that white people say, oh my God, these people of color are trying to take over our country. That's a joke. It's my country too.
Yeah, that was built on our backs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been wonderful speaking to you. I really appreciate your time. And for the audience watching, please don't forget that MLK FBI is available to watch on Dogwoof on demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
good.